All right, so it's been a couple of weeks since my last upload, and I did promise you all a video going into a deep dive on the Bron VHS tape. And I want to do that today, and I also want to just very quickly, briefly mention the latest video that Mob Games have released as well. But if you are wondering why it took so long for me to get to this video, you can probably tell in my voice, I am once again sick. I went to a convention, I picked up some con flu, I don't know what it is, but I've been very, very sick. Again, I've been sick for over a week now, so I'm going to do my best. Please bear with me, and I promise not to go out. I promise not to leave the house for a little while, okay? There you go. So before we get into the Bron VHS tape, let's very quickly cover the latest video by Mob Games on their channel. So they did this 10 secrets you might have missed. It's a nice format. It's a nice format, Mob Games, right? It's a cool format, yeah. But they did this 10 lost secrets from chapter 2. It's a really great video. I really enjoyed it. But it shed some light into the development process, and it also gave us a little bit of insight into their mentality behind some of the decisions they made. And it also showed some cut content too. Now, what's really interesting about this cut content is we see a little bit more into the mentality behind Mommy Longlegs. Now, if you haven't seen this video, the long and short of it is Mommy Longlegs was originally going to have some different dialogue, and in that different dialogue, she mentions another character. Now, there are a couple of people this character could be. It could be Huggy Wuggy. I think that's what Sheep Rampage has decided they think it's going to be, and it also could have been 1006. Maybe Mommy used 1006's actual name here, which is why it's covered up. But either way, whoever it is, Mommy did have some sort of relationship with a toy in the factory. Now, this is really interesting for our theories. If we assume that it is as simple as Huggy Wuggy, well, that could mean that whenever somebody enters the factory, implying that people have entered before, by the way, something very interesting to think about, but it could mean that Huggy would communicate and almost work with Mommy Longlegs. Like he would tell her that somebody was in the factory, which is very interesting. Like these guys were almost working together, but it almost does seem like they had their own little areas. Like chapter 1, that area was Huggy's like home, if you will. And then this area is Mommy's home. And it seems like they don't, like, it's almost like they've been given a little area of the factory that's theirs and they don't mess with each other. Which is very interesting, especially considering we know what happens to Mommy when she dies and knowing that 1006 takes her away. It really is setting up this idea that the surviving toys or the living toys in this factory have some sort of hierarchy, or they have some sort of system set up. And it really does seem like 1006 is the one that has set all of this up and has given people their own little areas, which is very interesting. Now, again, it could be 1006 that Mommy is talking about here, which would be very interesting, but it's also kind of poignant if you think about it. If she is talking about Huggy here, saying, oh, Huggy usually tells me when people are on their way down here, it could be very interesting that she doesn't know that, we dispatched Huggy in chapter 1, which is very interesting. Maybe they were friends, maybe they had a relationship. It also kind of gave me the vibes that they had some sort of like relationship. I don't know, like the way that she was talking about this person makes it sound like they were almost like a couple. I don't know. Anyway, my point was there were some really interesting things, and I would recommend you go and watch that video if you haven't already. But getting on to the main topic, the Bron VHS tape, there is a ton to talk about, and I don't know if anybody's covered all of this yet, but I'm going to do my best to cover everything from that Bron VHS tape, because there was a lot to talk about, and I only just scraped the surface of it in my last video. So first of all, if we look inside this room, there were a couple of little secrets in here. This seems to be some sort of lab, and I assume this was somewhere in the innovation wing. This is definitely in the factory. We can tell by the floor. So my guess would be it's somewhere in the innovation wing. But a couple of the posters on the wall are really interesting. The main one you've probably already looked at is very interesting, and it does look like it's half human, half toy, which could be hinting this was a concept of how they would fit the organs or how they would fit the living systems within the toys, which begs a very interesting question. If we look at Huggy Wuggy, for an example, you could 100% see how they could fit a full living human inside there, but how would they do that with Mommy? Mommy has a very different body shape. What about the small ones? Now, we see in this video that Bron is living. How the hell did they fit somebody in there? Like, did they just use the brain? Is it just the brain? I don't know, but it's weird how they kind of they have this way to squeeze somebody into a small doll body, and I think this is part of the science of that. Now, the other poster, very interestingly on the left, this poster is the Bron safety poster, which is either a really cheeky little nod by Mob Games, or it was some foreshadowing, or a little bit of both. But the idea that this Bron safety poster would be here in the video where we see Bron get absolutely mauled by these other toys, just I thought was quite funny. Now, in this scene where we see Bron in the room with all the toys, this is very, very similar to the Kissy Missy VHS. If you remember, in that video, I showed you that you could see Kissy Missy moving in the dark, but when they turn the lights on, she stands completely still, very similar to musical statues. Now, again, I think this is a big hint, and I think we had a huge hint here showing the PJ Pugapilla and the Mommy Longlegs behind Kissy. I think this was trying to tell us very subtly that the scientists here were using psychological manipulation to train these dolls in the behavior that they wanted. So for example, I do think that the final game we played in chapter 2, the statues game, I forget what it's called, but the statues game was literally them subtly training these people to stand still when the lights are on, something that would be very beneficial to them. They don't want people knowing that they have these living dolls. They don't want people knowing that these experiments were successful unless, you know, they were in on the experiments. There definitely were staff members in this factory that had no idea these experiments were going on. And if one of these toys escaped, it would be very, very handy that they would stand still in the light and they would only move in the dark, where you could easily say, oh, it was just your imagination. So I think this was very, very strongly hinted. And now this scene here is also very, very interesting to this too. For example, we can see these dolls moving. Very clearly they are moving, which also leads into one of my very earliest theories in chapter 1, where I said we were going to see an army of mini Huggies. Now we can actually see some mini Huggies here, so we know for a fact that they were around, which is very, very cool. The cursed Huggy is still one of my favorite theories. But in this scene as well, we can also see the POV of Bron, and this looks very much to me like a gas mask. Now, this could have several different meanings. It could just be showing Bron's POV and nothing more. But I do also think it's very interesting that we had the gas mask in the teaser for chapter 3. We know the gas is going to be something, or we're assuming that the gas is going to be important because it's in the thumbnail and we see the gas mask. And I have a whole theory about the gas that I haven't released yet, but we'll come to that another day. But it's very, very interesting that we see this POV, which looks like we're looking for a gas mask. Now, again, it is just looking through Bron's eyes. Bron has these eyes. And in fact, a lot of people, when we saw this gas mask, a lot of people immediately said, this reminds me of Bron, which is interesting. But it could also be a very subtle hint. Again, this is what we're going to see in chapter 3. There's a good chance that we are going to have to use a gas mask in chapter 3. Because, you know, the gas is going to be loose in the factory somewhere. We're going to have to try and avoid it, you know, not die or whatever. And this might be what we're going to look through in chapter 3. This could be a hint that we're going to have a reduced visibility, which would be something new to the series. Would be very interesting if we had to avoid some sort of creepy monster, Bron, and in that area there was limited visibility because of the gas mask that we have to wear and because of the gas. But also on this note of the gas, I've already theorized before that the gas could be some sort of failsafe in this facility. It could have been their backup plan. We know, for example, that when Huggy escaped the factory, they used tranquilizer darts to try and bring him down. We've already discussed that these living dolls were probably incredibly, incredibly expensive to produce, knowing that many of these experiments failed. We now see Bron has failed as an example. So many of these experiments would fail. It was probably very expensive to do the process and to do the science and to try and, you know, get somebody into one of these toy bodies and so on. It's probably very, very expensive. And these dolls were probably looked after better than the staff, let's be honest. But either way, they don't want to kill a doll or an experiment that escapes or goes rogue or whatever. They would probably want to try and control it. And so they would probably use the gas, which could be something to do with the poppy. It could be a poppy mixture or some sort of poppy gas. Again, it's red. So they probably use that to pacify them, to keep them under control, perhaps even to, if anything was to go wrong, to completely knock them out so they could then go and restrain them. And we also see a big hint of this too. If you see the room that Bron is held in, we know that he's being held in here for his own safety, but it does look very much like isolation or some sort of prison cell. We can also see this grate in the bottom of the room. Now, yes, this is probably ventilation, but this is also probably a great way for the scientists to pump gas into this room. For example, if they want to take the doll out of this room to somewhere different, they probably would gas them first. And this is probably one of the reasons why 1006 is so angry. Probably one of the reasons why these dolls rebelled in the first place, because they are being treated like absolute cattle. They're not being treated like humans. They're not being treated like people. They're being treated like animals. And this is something that I think is very interesting. But this is also probably very similar to the room that 1006 was held in. And so you can see it looks like it's very difficult to escape from, but it also could be a little bit of a hint at how some of these dolls could maybe escape. They could get into the vents, which we know something that Huggy Wuggy likes to do, for an example. But something else that I want to bring your attention to is something that I theorized right away when I was watching this video. I find it very, very interesting that Thomas, who we now know is Bron, was originally, he volunteered for this because he got lung cancer. Now that is already very poignant and very, very dark that somebody who got lung cancer volunteered for this. Like, did he actually volunteer? Did he just want anything to, to extend his life? Was this his last chance kind of thing? Or was he pressured into it? Who knows? But I also find it very, very interesting that he got lung cancer, knowing that there is some sort of gas in this factory. Is there a chance that he got lung cancer because he was exposed to this gas? And in fact, this stuff has actually happened in real life. There are stories of factory workers, especially in the past, who have been exposed to deadly chemicals and they were told it was completely fine. I mean, there's examples of people literally ingesting uranium or similar chemicals because they were used in the paint and no one told them that they weren't supposed to ingest it and they licked the paintbrush. The idea that these staff members were exposed to dangerous chemicals which could kill them, and in Thomas's case, probably was what killed him, ended up making him part of this morbid experiment, is just really, really dark. It's capitalism at its finest. Now, there's been a lot of debate about who exactly attacked Bron, and I'm pretty convinced at this point it was Boxy Boo. Most of the evidence points to Boxy. If you look at this claw, this looks just like Boxy's claw, and you can also hear a little part of the Jack in the Box music right before he attacks. So I'm pretty convinced that this is Boxy Boo that attacks him. He was the first one that went there, and we know Boxy likes to eat things, so there's a good chance he was going for that. Now, some people have said it must have been Kissy that attacked him, and I don't agree with this at all. And the reason why people say it could be Kissy that attacked him is because we see Kissy Missy scurrying away when the scientists run in to try and rescue Bron. Now, that doesn't mean it was Kissy that attacked him. There was a whole bunch of toys in here, and the scientist does say they attacked him, not he attacked him or it attacked him, they, plural, right? So the idea that it was probably multiple of the toys that attacked him makes sense, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that Kissy attacked him. We don't know what Kissy was doing. Was she just checking him out? Was she checking he was okay? Was she joining in? Was she attacking him too? Was she just really hungry? Is this a different Kissy to this one? We don't know how many Kissy Missies there are. There could be 10, there could be 1. So there's just so many questions here, but I do think that it's very interesting that the Kissy Missy scuttles away like this. Now, first of all, I find it very interesting because she scuttles away very similarly to Huggy Wuggy, who escapes in the last VHS, or in Huggy Wuggy's VHS. And what I find very, very interesting about that is we see almost 2 different behaviors from these dolls. We see Huggy walk on 2 legs in chapter 1, and we also see Kissy Missy walk on 2 legs in chapter 2, but then in these VHS videos, they seem to run around on all 4s and scurry around in a much more animalistic way, which again could just be that these people or these dolls have different ways of moving. They have different moods or something like that. Or maybe they learnt to walk more like humans because later on, this was something that they were trained to do, for an example. Or it also could be that these are very different Kissy and Huggies to the ones we've seen so far in the game. It's entirely possible that there are multiple of some of the big dolls. Again, we have no evidence to say that there are or there aren't. But it also could be possible that this Kissy we see here is a very different Kissy to this Kissy that we see here. So it's hard to theorize at the moment because we see very different behaviors. We also hear something scream, and I do think that one of them that screams is Kissy, but it also there could be a Huggy here too. I do see like a little bit of blue over in the corner here, so it could be that there's a Huggy Wuggy in here too. But the Kissy, or whatever it is that screams, sounds really human. In fact, it really reminds me of the Backrooms videos in a lot of ways, but it sounds really human, which is very interesting that they have this human style scream, something that we didn't hear again from Huggy in chapter 1, and we didn't hear it from Kissy in chapter 2 either. In fact, Kissy was completely silent. So it's very interesting that this one seems much more skittish, much more animalistic, and this one seems much more human. It could be dual personality, something that I've talked about before, or it could even be that not all of these experiments were human. This is also another possibility. If you remember back in chapter 2, we had that note that they originally used rats in these experiments, and then they wanted to move on to something bigger because they thought it would be more successful. But what we haven't maybe considered yet is that they might not have gone straight from rats to humans. They could have gone from rats to cats, to dogs, to cows, I don't know. They could have gone to any number of different animals before they went to humans, and it's entirely possible that some of these dolls are actually animals. If they can get it to work with a human, there's nothing to say that they can't get it to work with animals. And in fact, if you look at PJ Pugapilla as a great example, PJ really does act like a dog. If you look at PJ compared to Mommy, and again, even compared to Kissy and Huggy, there's very animalistic behavior there. Like PJ really does, to me, feel like a dog, whereas Mommy feels like a human. So it's entirely possible that some of these experiments are actually animals, and that could explain why some of them are much more aggressive than the humans, because the humans are much more intelligent and have much more reasoning, whereas some of them don't, and they would be much more difficult to control, which adds an extra layer of creepy to this whole thing, because, you know, you could maybe reason with somebody like Mommy. Yes, she's very angry and very aggressive, but we could maybe have reasoned with her, you know, if we'd have played with her, if we'd have appeased her more. But it seems like some of these experiments there is no reasoning with, and maybe they are acting basically on their pure animalistic urges, which is to feed. Could explain a lot about why some of these experiments seem to behave very, very differently. But this also again ties into my original thing about the light. If you see when this door is opened and the light opens, you also see that Kissy Missy scurries away like she's scared, which again could be her scurrying away from the light because she knows she's not allowed to move in the light, or again it could be that she is just some sort of animal like a dog or a cat or something like that. So another question I want to ask is, why exactly did these toys attack Bron? Now the scientist says it's because they knew this one was different, and there could be a number of different explanations for this. Now the first one is that the toys somehow knew this Bron was not an orphan like them. Again, these could be orphans. We have some pretty strong evidence that many of the experiments were taken from the orphanage program. We know that the orphans were being held in this underground facility and they were being tested on for their reflexes and so on. So it makes a lot of sense to me that these orphans were being tested to see who would be a good candidate for the program. But again, the other explanation, or at least another explanation, is that these toys are more animalistic than we thought. Again, they either are animals or perhaps they've just become more animalistic. You know, like we've seen stories of people that are put into horrible situations. They often become much more aggressive, much more primal. And this could be on display here as well. They maybe sensed his weakness. Maybe they saw that Bron didn't really know what was going on. He wasn't strong. And so perhaps they just saw him as food. You know, they cull the weak like many pack animals do, for an example. So maybe that was something that they saw him and thought, he's not as good as us, right? He's not on the same level as us, so he can just become food. Maybe. And again, this could all just be linked back to the fact that they were hungry, and because they were so hungry, they saw somebody enter into their area and this new thing was weak, so they decided that he would be a good candidate for a meal. It's very, very difficult to know whether they were doing this maliciously or they were doing this because they were hungry. But it is also interesting that the scientist says they went for the throat, they went for the larynx, which is in the throat, which again feels very animalistic to me. So either these people are becoming more animalistic over time because of this process, or again, they were animals. Now, I've already covered this in my last video, but there is a hidden message in this video. At the end, there is this mysterious sound that plays, and a few people in my live stream suggested that I put it through a spectrogram, which I did. And this required a little bit of playing around. Some people have tried to replicate this and they can't. You basically have to shift the pitch. Once you shift the pitch either up or down, you can get it to where you can see this message. which this message in itself has a lot to talk about. So this message, when you finally get it right, it will show the words "go to sleep," as well as this weird looking image here. Now the image, I'm not sure what it is. Some people think they can see the gas mask in it. To me, it looks more like the operating room, looks more like the lights from that room. But either way, it's very, very difficult to see what it is. But there's an image there and the words "go to sleep." The "go to sleep," I think, is the most important thing. And I think that the most likely connection here is going to sleep with the gas. Now, there's two interesting things to talk about. First of all, there is the "go to sleep," which could be referring to the gas, which could be, again, how the scientists tried to, keep control over these experiments. Go to sleep. It could also be a reference to how you go to sleep and then you wake up as a doll, which is really creepy if you think about it. Go to sleep and then you wake up and, oh no, my body's different. But what's also really interesting about it is it sounds to be very contrasted to what Poppy has been saying this entire time. Right the way from chapter 1, somebody has been saying, wake up. They keep saying, get up, wake up. And we also saw in the full trailer for chapter 2, we could always hear Poppy in the background saying, wake up. And then the trailer ends with Poppy saying it directly to our face, wake up. So there is this really strong theme of people being asleep and then people waking up. And again, this all could just be part of one narrative of these people who went to sleep and woke up differently. It also could be a part of a narrative that we aren't fully awake right now. Something is going on. I have a whole theory about that. Especially when it comes to the gas and what we're actually seeing might not be what is actually happening. But either way, there's this really strong connection between going to sleep, which again could be referencing the gas, and then waking up. Poppy, for some reason, wants us to wake up. Is that, again, because she's actually good and she wants us to see what's going on here? Or is that because she has a plan for us? Either way, I find it very interesting that this go to sleep is almost in a direct contrast to what Poppy says. Again, this could be setting up the idea that 1006 and Poppy are at odds with each other. They have very different goals, or it could be showing something completely different. It could even be hinting that they're working together secretly. Who knows? And I do think that the main message of go to sleep is in relation to the gas, and I do think the gas is going to be something very, very important for chapter 3. But yeah, these are just some of the thoughts that I have about the Bron VHS. Like I say, I think this really is setting up chapter 3, and I think there's going to be some very important things that we're going to take away from chapter 3. I also have a very, very dark theory, and I think that Mob Games could really go dark with chapter 3 if they wanted to. I don't know how dark they're going to go, but knowing that we've seen orphans who have been turned into dolls and all this secret stuff going on, I mean, they really could go dark with it. I still don't know if I'm going to release that theory just yet because it is an incredibly dark one, but we'll see. But yeah, if there's anything I missed, let me know down in the comments. Like I say, this was kind of an unscripted video today because I'm still not fully recovered. I'm sorry it took so long. I hope you enjoyed this one. And of course, if we get anything new, I'm back now. No conventions now. I'm back. So if we get anything new, I will jump on it. I will bring that information to you. And I also have a couple of like Amanda the Adventurer videos that I maybe want to do as well. But I'm going to try and get better. I'm going to try and rest up. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.